Welcome to the Razors Inc. podcast with your host, Jonathan Farini. Once in a blue moon, a movie comes out that is unarguably an action movie. But the action is driven not by chases or explosions, but through dialogue and conversation. Think 12 Angry Men, A Few Good Men, or even My Dinner with Andre. So pour yourself a drink, pull up a chair, and hear Jonathan's take on movies, television, and today, a tense nuclear war drama that will have you on the edge of your seat. Here's your host, Jonathan Farini.
We live in a world with a great deal of saber-rattling among nuclear-armed nations and nations engaged in hostile actions which have increased the opportunity for war. Which leads me to a 1965 movie named The Bedford Incident, which has many of the trademarks of failure, leading to catastrophic outcomes for today's hostile times. The Bedford Incident is a 1964 Cold War thriller about a deadly game of cat and mouse between an American destroyer and a Soviet submarine. The story is set against the backdrop of constant Cold War surveillance at sea, and the plot unfolds aboard the fictional USS Bedford on patrol in the Arctic waters near Greenland.
Here's what this is all about. You can take notes, Mr. Lunsford. We're positioned in the Denmark Strait, right about here. Midway between Greenland and Iceland, much closer to Moscow than Washington. Now, this ship functions in two ways. One, as a part of NATO defense, and two, the defense of the United States against enemy aggression by air or sea. And to put it very simply, the Bedford can inflict more damage in 10 minutes than the entire United States Navy caused in World War II.
Wow.
But that's not our purpose. We're primarily hunters, stalkers.
Of subs.
That's right. We track by ear an enemy who is also intently listening for us.
There definitely is Russian submarine activity at present in the Denmark Strait, right?
Right. Technically, they can come and go as they please. Cold War, no Cold War, so can we.
The film portrays the psychological impact of the Cold War as a corrosive force that produces paranoia, exhaustion, and dehumanization of the enemy. There's a corrosive effect of ideology in Richard Widmark's portrayal of Captain Finlander.
Captain, I would like to put in a word for that
Mr.
kid up
Lunsford.
there. I mean,
You will oblige me by not referring to the security breach on the part of my crew member again.
yes, but
The Department of Defense wants you to have full cooperation in the preparation of a story for your magazine. All right, that I'll give. But how and why I discipline my crew is none of your business. Understood? Do you understand me, Mr. Lunsford?
Yes, sir.
He's a Cold War warrior, an obsessive, almost manic belief in his purpose, to the point of disregarding protocol and common sense. His relentless pursuit of the Soviet submarine is less about following orders and more about an internal, personal war he feels he must win. Ironically, a former Nazi U-boat captain, serving as a NATO observer, even tells Finlander that his methods frighten him.
You are in the power here, Eric. It is not a force. It is just you.
You mean you're trying to say that you consider me desperate?
No, Captain. To be frank, I consider you frightening.
The dehumanization of the enemy is critical because Finlander views the Soviet crew in terms of an ideological struggle rather than as human beings. He sees no reason to de-escalate the situation. There's this theme of a toll on the crew by being on a constant high alert, creating exhaustion and error. In fact, the final mistake that triggers the nuclear response is not an act of malice, but an act of tragic human error committed by a young, exhausted, and frightened ensign who misinterprets an order and launches a rocket.
All systems armed and ready.
This is insane!
Now, don't worry, Commodore. The Bedford will never fire first. But if he fires one, I'll fire one.
Fire one.
There's a psychological vulnerability of the crew that we see, which contrasts the captain's hardened demeanor with the younger, more vulnerable crew members. The film suggests that the institutional pressure to perform perfectly in a situation with nuclear stakes is just an unbearable psychological burden. There's a really strong role of the outsider running through the film. We see it through a journalist's perspective, played by Sidney Poitier's character, Ben Munsford, who really serves as the audience's conscience as an outside observer. He tries to reason with Finlander, asking him to consider the human element of the conflict.
Would you attack a Russian submarine?
Well, let's put it this way, Mr. Munsford. I keep them interested with the hunt. There's something very exciting about the hunt.
And he represents the feeling of helplessness experienced by civilians who were acutely aware of the existential risk of nuclear standoff, but could do nothing to prevent it. There's a conflict running through the film with the ship's doctor, a naval reservist played by Martin Balsam, who provides another outside, more humanistic perspective. He represents the voice of reason, concerned with the crew's health and the emotional strain they are under.
What do you say you and me jump ship?
Baby, it's cold outside.
Well, I'm so burned I wouldn't even feel it. Right out loud. You want to know my theory? My theory is that he hates doctors. Now, you give him a plain, humble, scientific genius, but don't stop there. Make sure that he can stand watch, that he can navigate, and that he can man a battle station.
But that's the new Navy, Doc.
Yes, Ben, I know. I know times have changed, but this is a floating IBM machine. Can you see any of those guys singing Anchors Away, for example?
Old nostalgia's got you,
Not
Doc.
funny. It's not funny, Ben. Have you ever seen these boys playing poker? They never relax. Well, they can't. He's sounding GQ every 2 minutes. This man is playing at war. Now, how long do you think he can keep it up? He's got the crew going at fever pitch. They're triggered up. They're geared to shoot, and they can't shoot. They're frustrated. Now, that's abnormal. It's inhuman, and it's dangerous.
Another theme is brinkmanship. This is a central tactic of Finlander. That means pushing the enemy to a breaking point to force a mistake. It's the very essence of brinkmanship, a core strategy of the Cold War. It's a hunt to exhaustion tactic, a strategy, so to speak, of threatening nuclear retaliation to force an opponent to back down.
He didn't surface during the night. He couldn't. We must have been directly over him, so he's out of breathing air. Staying down, he couldn't charge his batteries, so he can't run. So you see, Commodore, we've accomplished the most important step. We've made him desperate.
The Bedford and the Soviet sub communicate only through aggressive, non-verbal actions. The inability to de-escalate the situation through rational communication is what ultimately leads to catastrophe. There's a consequence of a war that is never, quote, hot, unquote, meaning a psychological toll created by a tense standoff which wears down the crew's mental state, just as the constant threat of nuclear annihilation wore on the global psyche of the world during the Cold War. The film really shows the standoff as a game versus the stakes affair, which highlights a dissonance between treating a potential nuclear war like a game of strategy versus the actual catastrophic stakes involved. If you took an economics course, it's kind of like a game theory exercise. There's some great bookends to the Bedford incident. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1956. It's a science fiction horror film and a classic allegory for Cold War paranoia and McCarthyism.
Listen to me. Please listen. If you don't, if you won't, if you fail to understand, then the same incredible terror that's menacing me will strike at you!
They come from another world, spawned in the light years of space, unleashed to take over the bodies and souls of the people of our planet, bringing a new dimension in terror to the giant super scope screen.
1962, The Manchurian Candidate was a political thriller tapping into fears of communist brainwashing.
You are to shoot the presidential nominee through the head. And Johnny will rise gallantly to his feet and lift Ben Arthur's body in his arms, stand in front of the microphones and begin to speak. The speech is short, but it's the most rousing speech I've ever read. It's been worked on here and in Russia on and off for over 8 years. I shall force someone to take the body away from him. Then Johnny will really hit those microphones and those cameras with blood all over him, fighting off anyone who tries to help him, defending America even if it means his own death, rallying a nation of television viewers into hysteria to sweep us up into the White House with powers that will make martial law seem like anarchy.
Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, 1964.
Now then, Dmitri, you know how we've always talked about the possibility of something going wrong with the bomb. The bomb, Dmitri. The hydrogen bomb. Well, now, what happened is one of our base commanders, he had a sort of, well, he went a little funny in the head. You know, just a little funny. And he went and did a silly thing. Well, I'll tell you what he did. He ordered his planes to attack your country. Well, let me finish, Dmitri. Let me finish, Dmitri. Well, listen, how do you think I feel about it? Can you imagine how I feel about it, Dmitri? Why do you think I'm calling you? Just to say hello?
Suggesting that global annihilation is a distinct possibility due to the psychological flaws of a few powerful men. Failsafe, see my podcast by the same name, 1964.
Those are vindicated bombers of the Strategic Air Command on routine patrol. Each plane carries 2 20-megaton hydrogen bombs designed to detonate over enemy targets. At any given moment, night or day, flights of those airplanes are in the air.
Military and political leaders are placed under extreme psychological duress as they struggle to avert an accidental war. Watch Failsafe and watch Strangelove together. One approaches the subject of nuclear annihilation in satirical form, and the other approaches the subject in cold, real-life consequences. On the Beach, see my podcast by the same name, 1959. It explored the despair and the question of how to face the end of the world with dignity and hope.
You all know the situation. I've given leave to many of you to stay here for personal reasons. It's understandable why some of you might prefer this. I think that the rest of you are entitled to decide what you'd like to do. I'd like you to think about it. Take a vote if you need to. Give me your decision by this evening. I think that's all.
Captain, we've already taken a vote. We'd like to head for home.
The screenwriter of the Bedford incident is a familiar name to this podcast, James Wilbur Poe, who wrote the script from a novel by Mark Raskovich. He wrote Around the World in 80 Days, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Lilies of the Field, and They Shoot Horses, Don't They? See my podcast by the same name. Look for performances by Wally Cox, James MacArthur. See my podcast, Hawaii Five-0, and Donald Sutherland in an early film role. The Bedford incident was released by Columbia Pictures, but filmed at British Shepperton Studios. See my podcast about British studios. Until I see you next time, please leave behind a soft footprint and think twice before you push the button. Class is dismissed.
And to that list of bookends, I might also include Hunt for Red October, which I thought was another brilliant nuclear war drama driven largely by story and dialogue more than action. But back to the Bedford incident, a worthwhile watch with one of the most devastating finales set to film. You've been listening to the Razors Inc. podcast with Jonathan Farini. Be sure to check out Jonathan's collection of fiction at jonathanfarini.com. Also, if you read Jonathan's short story, The Bel Air Inside the Bog, look for Bel Air Inside the Bog, Part 2, in which a retired English teacher learns about two missing high school students and sets out to solve the 50-year-old puzzle. Part 2 has been published in the collection book In the Thick of It, as well as Sunflowers, both published by Scars Publications. Go to scars.tv or find it at jonathanfarini.com. You can also drop an email anytime to razorsincpodcast@gmail.com.